Hi, everyone. Welcome. Is my sound coming through okay? Can somebody give me a thumbs up? Great. I have a different computer today that is about 10 years old, which is not that old in my life, but but very old in computer years. So I just want to make sure the sound is coming through. I'm going to share my screen too. Here we go. Great. And do you see a PowerPoint presentation?
Yes.
Beautiful. Thank you, everybody. So just very briefly, I know we cover these every time that we gather, just a quick reminder to focus on our group agreements and guiding principles, focusing on our common goal, building and strengthening partnerships, being open, participating and being self-aware. For our commissioners, know that I want to hear from all of you, and I will call on you, not to put you on the spot, but we really want to make sure that we hear all of your voices. Our guiding principles, again, recognizing systemic racism and social inequities, supporting learning and innovation, promoting transparency, and focusing on action and system change. So for the next 20 minutes or so, and I know we always run out of time, but we want to make sure that we hear from all of you. We're going to focus on a couple questions on strategy 3.2, and I'll bold it here so we can see it better, which is expand information and support to address housing and security for priority populations. We'll spend some time talking about what you think needs to happen to make sure that these programs and services reach the intended priority populations identified in South San Francisco. So we'll spend some time on that. And then for both 3.2 and 4.1, and again, 4.1 is continuing to leverage available land assets and both public and private resources to increase housing, affordable housing with a focus on meeting the housing needs of priority populations. We also want to talk about what anything else that you think needs to be considered to make sure that racial and social equity are integrated into those strategies. So let's start with number 3.2. What do you think needs to happen to ensure that these programs and services reach the intended priority populations in South San Francisco? Just, digesting and hearing the information that was just presented to us. And I will start in the order that I see on my screen. So is it okay to start with you, Commissioner Bobby?
Sure. I am admittedly out of my depth on this topic. So, I don't know that I have terribly much to add in terms of strategies that, the staff in this field, are far more conversant in than me. So like my kind of contribution would be something like, what about advertising? I'm just thinking, if when there's a website like housing insecurity and some of those websites that were talked about in the presentations, like if you're feeling housing insecure, you're thinking you're going to get kicked out of your apartment, and there's a sign, like a bus stop sign or something, just saying with the sort of hotline, number or website for people who might find themselves in distress. So I'm just thinking about like putting some sort of visual, advertisements, and obviously like things like radio too, like Spanish language radio, et cetera, could be ways to promote these services. That's all I got.
Beautiful. So very helpful. Thank you so much. Commissioner Pat Murray, please. What do you think needs to happen to ensure that programs reach the priority population?
Well, my first thought was community resource centers throughout the city. A community resource center in the school district And so that parents, when they need resources, we would be able to partner them with the resources. And then in neighborhoods of need, even if it's like in the churches or wherever, set up community resource centers that will help to partner the resources to the people that need it.
Mm-hmm.
But I do like the advertising idea too.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much. Commissioner Jeff?
Okay, so Commissioner Vaughn kind of took my answer with being a little bit out of my expertise. But one of the things that I've noticed, first of all, I think it's very important that the resource center, the one that we're starting with, is a brick and mortar and it's downtown. That's the area that we really want to get to. And what I've seen successful recently, and it goes along with this advertising component, is so the city has been giving out vaccines in the downtown area. And one of the things is they're not just relying on social media and press releases and things like that, which I think you do. But one of the things they're doing, which is kind of the old way of doing it, and I think it's working, is they're going door to door and they're passing out flyers. There's a lot of contact with the neighbors, with the neighborhoods, passing out flyers, and people are hearing about the vaccines when they wouldn't have, maybe otherwise. Maybe they're not tuned into social media. I think sometimes we kind of assume that everyone is on social media, and we know that's not the case. So I would say we need to continue to kind of do it the new way, but also kind of do some of the old school stuff of getting out and walking through the neighborhood, spreading the word, and passing out flyers. I think that works.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. I see Commissioner Vanessa as well.
Hi. I want to follow up on that. I would assume that the priority populations with housing insecurities are not going to have the strongest internet connection, the strongest access to websites and other resources. So I think passing out flyers, talking to people, advertising in places people congregate, like, or have to go to, like the laundromat, bus stops, made a lot of sense. I think that another thing is making sure to educate people who work in those services, like partner with the County San Mateo for the Human Services Agency, and make sure that if people come in for and qualify for Medi-Cal or CalFresh or any of those benefits, they're encouraged to learn about these other programs that are available to them. So creating brick and mortar opportunities, I think, is probably the best way to advertise.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Do I have anybody else? Another is, I know sometimes Commissioner Andrea is on the, her initials, or is that Aya? No, that's not Commissioner Andrea Fernandez. Okay, sorry about that. Great. Thank you so much for that. What about, some of these pieces, and I think we have looked at, some ideas, and you've touched on them already in terms of advertising, community resources, creating connections, really emphasizing old school and new school. And then there are a lot of, different ideas that were floated around as well. Is there anything else that you think might be missing? We talked about postcards, flyers, churches and community groups, social media, having I think somebody already talked about a link or an easy to remember website where people who are in distress can reach out to. Anything else that you can think of that you think needs to happen to make sure that the people who most need the programs and services are reached in South San Francisco? I guess yes, Commissioner Potts.
Yeah, the school district, we have 8,400 kids, and that many parents at least, and or families at least. So I mean, we have something called School Loop that has flyers that go out to all of the families. And so, if you have flyers, I'm sure the school district would be more than happy to pass them out to let them know, what they can do or where the resources are or what have you.
Mhm. Beautiful.
I think the Boys and Girls Clubs as well.
Mhm.
Mhm. Beautiful. Any others before we move on to our next strategy? Okay, great. What do you think, thinking about both of these strategies related to housing, 3.2 and 4.1, what are some of the key considerations that you believe need to be ensured to ensure racial and social equity? So when we're thinking about kind of both of these strategies and ideas for getting the word out and expanding information and support, how do we continue to center racial and social equity in implementing those strategies? Can we start with you, Commissioner Bobby?
I think in terms of racial and social equity, just given how racial distinctions seem to map onto geography so strikingly in this country, you can almost like make sure if you're doing your flyers, right, that you're going to the areas, to the neighborhoods where people of color live, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you're just it's targeting. You're targeting your outreach specifically, not in a blanket way, but sort of like Commissioner Jeff, the chief, was saying. I'm assuming that the COVID flyers were targeted to particular areas, and so you just want to have that kind of an approach with this as well.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, Commissioner Pat.
Yes, that sounds perfect, targeting. But I also think that the resources, we're targeting certain populations, and that on the other side of it, or like on the flyers, you say, who we're targeting, what this is for. And so that the people that can be helped by this are actually the ones being helped. So
and does this capture this idea, be explicit in the outreach materials, make sure that priority populations know that those services are intended to serve them? Okay. Great.
I have a question. Is there anything that the city like mails out to everyone as a matter of course, like a newsletter or some kind of a publication where you could put, a lot of these resources like in those publications that everyone gets? I mean, I was struck by the idea of how it was said in the previous presentation, how they were mailing out to every renter. I forgot what the example was, frankly, but the idea of getting in the mail a piece of paper with this information.
I think it's quarterly. Sharon, you're on here. Is it quarterly?
Yes, it's quarterly.
Yeah. And we're often looking for content, so
yeah,
there's room.
Yeah.
The other publication that's mailed out quarterly to all South San Francisco households is our activity guide that the Recreation Department does. So
there you go.
And actually sometimes depending on how much news is, how many events the city needs to get the word out about, that newsletter is sometimes bi-monthly. So there might between 4 and 6 per year, depending on the what's happening.
So between 4 and 6, Sharon.
Newsletters.
Newsletters. Yeah. Okay.
It's mailed to all South San Francisco addresses. I don't think they go to businesses. I think they just go to residents.
Mm-hmm. Great. Thank you. Thank you for raising that question, Commissioner Bobby, and for sharing that, Sharon. Commissioner Jeff, do you have any other ideas about or considerations to ensure racial and social equity related to these two strategies?
I think we've touched on the ones that I've been kind of thinking of. I can't really. Are we still on 3.2, right? We're not on 4.1.
Yeah, no, we can actually speak to 4.1 as well. So for both 3.2 and 4.1, so I'm thinking about leveraging land assets, public and private resources. What do we need to continue to keep in mind to ensure racial and social equity? So for both of the strategies.
I just 4.1 is so difficult because there's not a lot of available land, and land is so costly, and to get developers to develop the land. And then I think what we need to push, and I know that the city's doing it, and it's gonna, the push has to continue, is that affordable housing, which sometimes then, takes away some of the profit from the developers, which makes the whole thing go around, and which makes it so difficult. But I think really the only thing we can really do is just to continue to push for available affordable housing, especially in the areas that have land available and that are in the areas that we're targeting to try to find housing for people. I know that's not as easy as it sounds, but that is what I think we have to continue to push for.
That's great. Commissioner Vanessa, so for both strategy 3.2 and 4.1, and anything that comes up for you to ensure racial and social equity related to these two strategies?
I think one thing that's always kind of boggled my mind is social equity and income limits on low income housing units. I've noticed quite often it's incentivized for single income earners, where I've noticed like a housing will come up and the income limit is up to $100,000 a year for one person, and then for a family of 2 or 3 it's 140 or 150,000. So you're really only increasing it. So if you have 2 average income workers, you don't qualify for housing. So people who are kind of on that like cusp, maybe I think that we should take a good look at what the income limits are and how we're evaluating families and disincentivizing families to be able to afford these units.
Yes, absolutely. That's a great point, if I can type it out. Great. Anything else that's coming up for you in our last couple of minutes around any other things we should consider related to strategies around expanding, getting information out to address housing insecurity for priority populations, or leveraging available land, assets, or public-private resources to increase affordable housing? Okay. Well, I think those are all the two questions we have for you. So we have, with a minute to spare, look at us. We did really great. I'm happy to share this back with anybody in our group. Any of our commissioners here want to do a quick report back to the large group, and I'm happy to present this back and support you with it. But I think it'd be great to have one of you do a high level overview of our discussion. Don't all raise your hands now. Okay, no worries. How about I do the report back of the high level teams? If I miss anything, promise me you'll jump in and say what needs to be, anything else that needs to be said. Awesome, great. I'll see you back in the main room.
Thank you.
Sorry about leaving for a sec.
You showed good timing. She asked for a volunteer, and Bobby and I were both quiet.
Right.
And I like her voice better than ours anyway. So I think she's great.
I agree. Jeff, do you happen to know a Connor McGuire?
Oh yes, very well.
Yeah, he was a student of mine.